Welcome to CBS Sports HQ. I'm Chris Hassel. As we get you over the hump today, sliding into Final Four weekend, the women's Final Four beginning Friday in Tampa, men's Final Four Saturday in San Antonio. We have all one seeds across the board, except for the second-seeded UConn women. Ironically, the only team that's minus money to win it all. On the men's side, Duke is the favorite at even money. They play the Houston Cougars in the Saturday nightcap. We're going to break that down for you a little bit later this afternoon, but we're going to start with the first matchup on Saturday, which is actually the second matchup of the season between Auburn and Florida. Todd Golden's Gators beat Bruce Pearl's Tigers in Auburn back in February. Now one of those teams is going to be the first SEC school to play for a national title since Kentucky in 2014. Here's how they celebrated.
Hey, we look for three things when we recruit Gators. We want great attitudes, great work ethics, most importantly, guys that want to wear Florida on that chest. I don't care that these guys wear red tie. They're badass players, man. They go into the Final Four now.
You know where we're going, Tracy?
You're going to the Final
Four. To the Final Four. Yeah!
Auburn and Florida, Mike O'Donnell and Kyle Boone. And Mike, as you know, that these teams played in the jungle a couple of months ago. What kind of adjustment do you see Bruce Pearl making in the rematch after really being dominated by Todd Golden's Gators?
I think it was a bit eye-opening for, I think, a lot of college basketball fans. You know, leading up into that point, it was very obvious just how relentlessly good Auburn was throughout the course of the season. And really just the whole regular season. I mean, they were the best team. You know, if you look at resume and metrics and all of it, I mean, I understand you can make a case for Duke. You know, you could make a case for Florida, but Auburn was the best overall team. And in that game especially, I thought was really interesting, Florida's front court completely dominated Auburn in that game. And Alex Condon and Thomas Houck, they combined for 33 points and 19 rebounds. And it just never felt like Auburn could get anything inside of the paint, around the rim. Nothing was smooth. Nothing was easy. And as much as we talk about Walter Clayton Jr., and we will talk a lot about him, and deservedly so, he's an All-American, it's actually Florida's front court that was the difference maker in that game, and honestly has been the difference maker for the entire season for the Gators. But that matchup in particular, rebounding, even though we can dive into the analytics, Chris, and I know how much you love when I dive into the analytics, it's going to come down to the simple things. There's going to be a lot of winning plays for Auburn by not giving up offensive rebounds. They actually, out of all four Final Four teams, they have the worst offensive rebounding rate in terms of giving up offensive rebounds out of all four teams, the three other teams in the Final Four. That's going to be a huge deal. It sounds simple, it sounds obvious, but that is something that Auburn must fix in that matchup.
Yeah, and to echo Mike's point here, I think Auburn will come out with a plan. Florida did surprisingly take down Auburn at a time when Auburn clearly looked like the #1 team in college basketball, and they have not looked like that the last couple of weeks, to be clear. But that game in particular was kind of the eye-opening moment where Florida's depth really revealed itself, and the front court in particular started playing like the best front court in college basketball. This is going to be a test for Auburn, not only because they lost the last matchup, but also because Auburn, as we'll get to in a few minutes, is walking wounded into this matchup. Janai Broom dealing with an elbow injury. So, you know, I think this will be on Auburn's backcourt coming into this game because you've got Florida playing at a high level, particularly with Walter Clayton. Dealing with him is going to be a huge test for this Auburn backcourt. Tahad Pettiford's going to have to step up. They're going to need big minutes from Chad Baker-Mazara. So, you know, the front court, the backcourt, everything is going to have to be firing on all cylinders for Auburn to go and win this game and punch a ticket to the national championship game.
Kyle mentioned that injury to Janai Broom, not practicing again today. They're hoping to get him back on Thursday with that hyperextended non-shooting elbow, but we don't know at this point. Kyle, we know he's a gamer. We know that he's going to try to fight through it, but we saw him out there basically playing with one arm at the end of that Elite Eight game. Can they afford not to have him close to 100%?
I actually think they can, Chris. You're talking about one of the top 2 players in college basketball this season. So that seems like a tough task, right, for this Auburn team that has really relied on him throughout the season. And it's not the first time that Broom has been dealing with injury this season. He injured his shoulder earlier this season. He's been dealing with a nagging ankle injury. Here, as you can see, he comes down awkwardly and hyperextends his elbow. Yes, he did return to the game. He grabbed a one-handed rebound. He knocked down a three-pointer. That was awesome. I think it gave him a huge emotional lift. But the fact that he's playing, at least in that game, with one arm, not an encouraging sign. And he missed 2 practices this week. We'll see if he's able to get back practice in some limited fashion before this weekend. But, you know, I think Auburn is going to have to rely on playing without him, or at least not playing through him as they have this season. They're going to have to rely on some of their front court to step up. They're going to have to play through their guards, as they've done sometimes throughout the NCAA tournament. This is going to be a huge ask for Auburn, who I think even if Broom plays, is probably not going to be 100%.
Yeah, kind of following up on a key phrase that Kyle just said there, not relying on Broom. Something that's vitally important for Auburn in this game. Since the start of the SEC tournament, Auburn has shot just over, barely over 30% from 3. Now, this is, you have to treat Auburn like a team that's going to shoot over 35 to 38% from 3, but they have not shooting the 3-ball well at all. And in order to not rely on Janai Broom, Auburn has to make threes. Unequivocally, they have to shoot so much better than they have since the start of the SEC tournament. There's been an inconsistency from the 3-point line, and you brought up Pettiford. He needs not just a good game. Like, Pettiford has to be off the charts good in this game. Not necessarily from just taking tons of shots, but taking the right shots, and he needs to hit at least 4 threes in this game, I think, for Auburn to win. He can do that, but going back to Broom one more time, let's just put a percentage on it. If you assume that Janai Broom is at 70% health, 70 to 75%, he gets himself ready to go at that level, that's still probably a guy that gets you 17 points and 7-8 rebounds a game. And if you're making threes and Broom is in that 15 to 17 point range and that 6 to 8 rebounding range, which is, you know, a drop, you know, 20% drop of his average, you can win that game. You absolutely are able to perform and rely on other guys. But, you know, the one thing, Kyle, I will say, and Chris, no hero ball for Auburn. It can't be Chad Baker-Mazara taking shots that he thinks feels like 5 or 6 points when it really is only a 2-pointer or a 3-pointer. That has to be on lock. They got to play a perfect game from a wings perspective.
Well, these teams know each other well. These coaches know each other very well. Bruce Pearl, Todd Golden go way back to when Pearl coached him in Israel 15 years ago. Then Pearl gave him his real coaching start a little more than a decade ago on that Auburn staff. Here's Pearl on his pupil.
Todd was a great point guard, a great scoring point guard, and I always said, don't be fooled by that little Shane upon him. That's that beautiful face. He's a good-looking kid, but he's a tough guy. And his teams play hard, they play physically, and so, you know, don't let that sheepish look fool you. He's the real deal.
Golden, the guy who came over from San Francisco after leading them to the tournament. But I think going into this year, there weren't a lot of people, Kyle, that knew who Todd Golden was, other than some of that stuff that was floated out there off the court that he's been cleared on. How did he get this thing on this track to lead Florida from outside the top 20 preseason all the way to a dominant Final Four run?
Yeah, it's really impressive, like the roster that he's put together. And earlier this season, Todd Golden talked about his strategy to building this Florida team was basically trying to mimic the prime Golden State Warriors, which sounds very lofty, a little crazy, but also if you look at the way that Florida's played this season, it's kind of played out that way. He wants guys at every single position to be able to pass, to dribble, and to shoot. And certainly their guards have done that at a high level. But I think the way that Florida has elevated its way this season is by having front court players from, you know, power forwards to centers who can pass, dribble, and shoot. When Alex Condon is able to put the ball on the floor and attack dribble handoffs and be able to attack the basket. That is a different dimension that not a lot of teams have. So, you know, I wouldn't say that Florida is the prime Golden State Warriors, but they certainly have a lot of talent, and at every position they have been able to consistently beat teams and overwhelm teams with their depth throughout the season. Even in the NCAA tournament, they've been their backs against the wall against UConn in the second round, against Texas Tech in the Elite Eight, and they have just been able to wear teams down by punching consistently throughout 40 minutes and ended up winning. So, you know, it's impressive what they put together to make it to this Final Four.
And, you know, we talk a lot about Duke, and we've never seen a team this efficient on the offensive end, you know, essentially, and all the metrics and the Ken Palm analytics. And it's otherworldly what Duke is doing. The team that is closest to fully embodying what Duke does offensively throughout the season, not just the NCAA tournament, is the Florida Gators. And Kyle's point about the front court is more than just spot on. You go watch Florida play. When you've got 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot out on the perimeter, orchestrating the offense at the top of the key, their post players are the key to their offense. As much as Walter Clayton Jr. is an All-American, he's going to be an NBA player. He's been arguably the best point guard in the entire NCAA tournament. It is Florida's front court that initiates so much of the offense. Walter Clayton succeeds really on the shoulders of what Florida's bigs can do on the perimeter. If we're at the top of the key, you know, whether they're running types of Princeton action or chin action or zoom, and everything they do from a passing standpoint, and then being able to crash the offensive glass. You got to think about, why are they such a good offensive rebounding team? Well, a lot of times their posts are at the three-point line, and you get a running start to the rim. Sounds simple and obvious. That's not the way a lot of teams are built, and which makes them very, very difficult to scout against.
Florida played 10 games in the month of March, 7 against ranked teams. They won all 10 of those games. They're a slight favorite, 2.5 point favorite in this game. Kyle, who do you like?
Yeah, I like Auburn in this matchup, and I'm going to roll with the underdog. I think the big question here is obviously Janai Broom's status, but we talk about Florida's depth a lot, and I do think Florida probably has a slight advantage when it comes to depth, but don't sleep on Auburn's depth, man. Miles Kelly, Denver Jones, Tahad Pettiford, Chad Baker-Mazara, that is a really, really good backcourt that I think can make enough shots in this game against Florida. Florida's shown some leakage, right, since the SEC tournament. They look like the best team in the SEC tournament, no question, but they've had their backs against the wall several times in the NCAA tournament. Look like they could be eliminated. I think Auburn has the horses to get the Gators out of the NCAA tournament and advance into the title game.
Now, I'm picking Auburn for 2 reasons. Number one, just in spite of the multiple Florida Gators inside of the CBS HQ offices. And number 2, turnovers. Kyle just alluded to it a little bit. One of the issues in the NCAA tournament for Florida, and actually if you go back and you look at the losses in the regular season, they're getting double-digit turnovers. And the last 3 NCAA tournament games, Florida has had at least 10, if not more, turnovers. That's an issue against the way Auburn plays defense. I think that's going to be something that Auburn is going to lean in on and really try to exploit. I don't necessarily think they come from Walter Clayton Jr., those turnovers, but the wings have a tendency to over-dribble, over-attack, and there's going to be opportunities for there. I believe that Broom will be as close, you know, he's going to be over 75% healthy. At least, you know, mentally he'll get himself there. Number 2, I think they'll be able to fix the offensive rebounding issue. And number 3, I think Auburn will have less turnovers in this game. And those 3 things is the reason why I'm picking Auburn. I expect this game to be phenomenal. This is going to be a 1 or 2 possession game, I think, for the entire 40 minutes. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little overtime in this Final Four game.
SEC, the first conference to have multiple 1 seeds in the Final Four since 1985, when the Big East got Georgetown and St. John's in there. And Florida and Auburn are going head-to-head in the semis. Tip time 6:09 Eastern time on CBS and streaming live on Paramount+. And then that Houston-Duke game, the nightcap, 30 minutes after Florida-Auburn is done. Mike O'Donnell and Kyle Boone will be back with us to discuss our All-America team. Our CBS Sports top 5 players in college basketball, 3 of them still playing.